Hello, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. I'm glad that you can join me. Today, I'd like to talk about tabletop role playing games, or TTRPGs for short, or just RPGs, which is how I'll refer to them in this episode. If you're not familiar with the term, I'm certain you've at least heard of the most famous of these RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons, or D&D. D&D, while by far the most widespread and popular, is by no means the only game around. I'd say it's comparable to wrestling. If you're a casual fan of wrestling, or not a fan at all, you might think that there's only World Wrestling Entertainment and no other companies exist, when in reality, there's a wide variety of wrestling promotions that cover a lot of different styles. In that regard, Dungeons and Dragons is kind of like the WWE of the RPG world. Now, perhaps you've heard of these games, but you've never played one and you're not quite sure how they work. Allow me to enlighten you, my friend. One of the great things about RPGs is the simplicity of what's required to play. There's a little bit of variance, but for most games, all you need is paper, a pen or pencil, dice, and the most important element, your imagination. Everything else is optional if you're a player. If you're running a game, you probably have other tools like books and maybe a map and miniature figures to move around. Speaking of the person running the game, that person is commonly referred to as the dungeon master. Other games may use different terms such as game master, but for the most part, they're just referred to as the dungeon master. The DM has the daunting challenge of running the game and keeping everything in order. The players each control a single character, embarking on an adventure together. The DM controls everybody else. They are the monsters that the players fight, and they are the villagers that the players interact with. It's the DM's job to make sure the rules are being followed, guide the players, and most important, to make sure everybody is having fun. A typical session involves creating a character, if it's the beginning of a new game, which is done by rolling dice to determine what stats your character will start with. This goes a long way in deciding how you'll play. For example, if you want a character who fights up close and is really tough, you want to try and roll high numbers for your strength stat. If you want a smart character, you want to roll high for your intelligence stat. During character creation, you also decide what race and class to play. Humans, elves, and dwarves are typical for many fantasy games. Classes include things such as warriors, rogues, and wizards. Each class offers a unique way to play. Once characters are created, the dungeon master describes the initial setting and narrates the story so the players know what's happening. From that point, it's all about the players making choices and deciding what they want to do. For simple tasks, that typically involves the players telling the DM what their character is doing, but more difficult situations will also call on them to roll their dice. If you open a door and there's a goblin standing in the middle of the room, everybody can see that. But perhaps you want to roll the dice and check your perception skill, in case there's another goblin hidden in the shadows waiting to stab you in the back. Another scenario might be walking across a narrow bridge. Any character can do it if they take their time. But what if an outlaw starts shooting at you with a bow and arrow? Then it's time to roll the dice and see if you can dodge the arrows while also maintaining your balance on the bridge. The great thing about RPGs is that your character is only limited by your creativity. There are rules in place, but those are usually flexible and you can attempt to do literally anything you want. Now that you have a basic idea of what happens during a game, I just wanted to share some of my own experiences. If you're still not clear on how the game works, please ask, and I'll be happy to go into more detail for you. When I started reading fantasy books in the 6th grade with Dragonlance, the next logical step was to play Dungeons and Dragons. I had a lot of fun reading the books, so of course I jumped at the opportunity to actually play in a similar setting. The same kids who got me started on Dragonlance also played D&D, and they invited me to play. Overwhelmed by all of the options, I kept it simple and chose to play as a human fighter. I remember being very excited that there was an option for my character to have a guard dog as a traveling companion. Unfortunately, things were not meant to be. I believe our game was foiled before we started due to a teacher telling us that we weren't allowed to stay inside during recess. That was the end of that. Fast forward to when I'm roughly 20 years old. Someone I knew and talked to a little bit, but never hung out with, invited me to check out the D&D group he was part of. His group was about 10 guys sitting in someone's basement passing a bong around. I declined when offered and remained a silent observer for the session. Everybody was nice, and it seemed interesting, but that was my only time there. I don't know if I was allowed back to play, but I probably wouldn't have gone if invited. Maybe it was because there were so many people there that it felt a little daunting, especially since I've never been very social. They also weren't playing the typical Dungeons and Dragons. I think it was the same system, but they were playing in a World War II setting and they were also werewolves. And while there is no limit as to how many people can play an RPG, 10 is a bit much. I think 5 or 6 is a comfortable number. Having 10 made things progress very slowly. I'd say another 5 years went by and I still hadn't had a chance to play yet. Then one day I'm on MySpace. Quick side note, why did everybody abandon MySpace and jump over to Facebook? Other than being a little more organized and neater, Facebook had nothing going for it. MySpace offered a lot more customization options and was just more fun to use. Facebook was bland in comparison. Anyway, I'm on MySpace looking at people in the area. I see this guy that sounds cool. He has similar interests to me and he plays D&D. I decided to message him, which was rare for me because I'm usually not one to reach out to people like that. But we ended up talking and hanging out. I get invited to his gaming group and I finally get to play. I don't remember my first character, but I know it was a lot of fun. That group lasted for several years. We played every Sunday for about 6 hours and it was awesome. Sadly, a couple members moved out of the town, both of which were our only dungeon masters. And so that was the end of that group. We mainly played Dungeons and Dragons version 3.5, but we dabbled with others too. There was All Flesh Must Be Eaten, which, if you can't tell by the title, is all about zombies. There was a sci-fi game called Rifts. We didn't play too long because the party got wiped out, but it resulted in one of my most memorable role-playing characters, Sparky the Crazy. The Crazy was one of the character classes, and their trademark is that they're, well, crazy. So I basically got to play myself. The Dungeon Master, even a couple years after that game ended, would comment on how great a job I did role-playing the Crazy. That's pretty high praise. There was also 2nd edition Warhammer Fantasy, which really stuck with me. I enjoyed that world a lot. But no matter what game we were playing, there was always lots of laughter and good times, and it was a really fun experience. One memory that sticks out from when we played Dungeons and Dragons, and this was not one of my greatest moments, but it's something that everyone remembered. We were fairly new characters, maybe level 2 or 3, and we had to go inside a cave to take out some orcs. Now, the cave wasn't very big, but it was still dark inside. I was playing a human monk, so I couldn't see inside, but I was itching for a fight. The rest of my group was trying to plan a strategy on the best way to approach the cave, but I didn't have time for that. Knowing that the orcs were probably just right beyond my vision watching us, I decided I would take matters into my own hands. I charged into the cave doing a flying jump kick, feeling certain I'd hit someone. It was not meant to be, however. I rolled the dice and rolled a 1. A 1 is an automatic failure and the worst possible result you can get. Not only did I end up not hitting anybody, but I tripped on a rock and wiped out, thus making an easy target for the orcs to finish me off. Oh well. At least it made for some good laughs. It's been 11 years since that group disbanded, and that's the last time I got to play an RPG, at least as a player. I missed playing a lot, so I decided to start my own group as a dungeon master. There were a couple failed attempts at first, but I finally succeeded in getting a group going about 4 years ago. As I mentioned earlier, Warhammer really interested me, and so that was my game of choice. I learned as we went along how to be a DM. It was challenging, but everybody in the group seemed to be having fun, and that's the most important thing. We went on hiatus for a little bit in 2019, and then we all know what happened in 2020, so we never got back together again. I think it's time to change that, though. I still get asked about the campaign, so I know there's interest. One thing I am working on getting changed is my RPG book collection. My chances of being a player anytime soon are slim, so I want to go through my books and get rid of the ones I'm not likely to use anymore, then replace them with different games, ones that are more appealing for me to run as a dungeon master. I'm also looking out for games that are geared towards young children, something I can play with my own child in a few years when he's old enough. I think it would be great to see more parents get their kids involved in RPGs because there's a lot of benefits. It's a great way for them to work with others and develop their social skills. RPGs involve lots of teamwork, problem solving, and can help to nurture creativity. There's also plenty of opportunities to exercise basic math and reading skills. That's all I've got for today. Now it's time for me to hit eBay and get rid of some of those books. If you have any thoughts or questions on role-playing games, you can find me on Twitter at @ahappymomentpod. Thank you for joining me today. I'll have some exciting announcements in the near future. Until then, take care. Bye.